Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name's Nick Tapper. I'm the Marketing Manager for Arts Council England. And today I'm chatting with Luke Burton, our Libraries Director. Luke's been with us almost a year. And so we thought we'd have a quick chat with him about what his experiences are so far. So before we delve into that year that you've had, what we want to know is why libraries? What is it about them that makes them so special to you and the communities they serve?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one of the things seems to be asked quite a lot recently. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, libraries have always been a part of my life. So my parents were both librarians. You know, they were both trained librarians, both academic and public libraries. And then it kind of felt like a natural fit. So it was archaeology for a while, and then it decided to be trained. And I think for me, it was partly the combination of being able to find an answer. You know, that's where you went to get the answer to something. Always liked asking questions when I was a kid, pestering my mum with questions. But also, I think it was a bit of, I think I saw the impact that they had. So certainly the school library my mum worked in, I saw what they did for me and the other kids at school. And I saw what they did for the communities that I lived in as well. You know, so it was that place you went on a rainy day or a wet day, or if you were looking for something to do. It was always the place to go. So I think it was our local library was a big part of me growing up.
So quite a safe space for you to be in and a repository of knowledge that you could learn from and that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think the questions was always a thing. I mean, I remember mum saying, you know, when I was a kid, I'd be sitting around the table saying, why are peas green? What are teeth made from? You know, stuff like that. So I think maybe some of it came from that. She didn't
She
have the
sends
advantage.
you off to the library going, the library will tell you what the answers are to
But
those.
pre-internet, you know, so she didn't have that option to, you know, to look it up. So I think that was part of it. And then, yeah, it was part of, you know, it was places where we went on a Saturday and you always got a pile of books to come home with.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. And what kind of books did you tend to bring home as a kid? What were your go-to kind of pieces of reading?
I think I was maybe a sort of a stereotypical sort of teenage boy. It was non-fiction stuff for me. So it was like World's Most Dangerous Animals, or you know, World's Tallest Buildings, or the Guinness Book of Records and stuff. And then it wasn't until I got a bit older that I got into sort of fiction books. So a lot of the time it was stuff on nature and science. And flags were always a big thing for me, still are. You know, but bit of a weird interest in flags. So, you know, that was always.
Absolutely. Sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. So the Arts Council is the national development agency for libraries. What does that really mean and how does that benefit libraries and the people that use them?
Well, I think, you know, Darren Henley, our chief exec, spent a lot of time, you know, clearly saying that libraries are a core part of the Arts Council, and they have been since they came over from the Museums and Libraries and Archives Council. But so you know, libraries are not special and different, but they are special and different. You know, so you know, we have a remit within the libraries team to support all 152 local authorities in England. You know, so while you know every art form and discipline has its individual aspects to it. I think particularly for libraries, we have that role to support everyone. So you know, we support all services with guidance, with sort of resources. You know, we try and fill the gaps where there's knowledge gaps, or fill the gaps where there's evidence gaps. We talk to services about the really good things they were doing. We try and advocate for them, both internally in the Arts Council, because there's still a role to say the role that libraries has to play in the wider cultural offer, but also we advocate for libraries externally. So we work with, obviously, as an arm's length body of DCMS, we work with them. We work with other bits of central government to try and say, this is the really good stuff that libraries do and how it can support you. But then obviously we also directly fund as well. So we're directly funding 16 libraries and 2 investment principal support organisations. So that's it's a huge increase in, you know, a tripling of investment in the portfolio. So it's really great to see that sort of strong commitment through Let's Create to invest more in libraries. And that's more, we've invested more money, but we're also trying to invest more time as well. So I think the libraries have a key role to play in that place agenda, you know. So while, you know, I'm sitting in Newcastle Library just now, Newcastle Library has a role to play within the library sector. It also has a key role to play across the city and across the region as well, in terms of the services it delivers from a cultural aspect, but also in terms of health and well-being, digital inclusion, business support, all sorts of different areas where it can support people.
It's amazing the breadth of the role that libraries have. You know, you might look at some organizations and see them specialize in certain parts of work and that sort of thing, and that's great. But libraries have such a broad remit. You know, how do they manage to do that so well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a challenge. I mean, we've seen the challenges that local governments faced over the last, sort of decade or so, and libraries have always been adaptive. They've always been responsive to community needs. So whether it was in the late 90s when computers came in, they responded to a need there. Whether it was digital inclusion skills, whether it was during the pandemic response, libraries and library staff stepped up and helped support communities through that. So I think, libraries have constantly evolved and adapted to what's needed. So I think some services specialise, and they have a real, expertise in certain areas. So if you talk to colleagues who work in Suffolk, for example, one of our MPOs, they've got a really strong offer around health and mental health and sort of supporting people there, and they've built those local connections. You go to some other places and they've got a real strength around business support. So again, I'm in Newcastle City Library, where the first business and IP centre outside of London was developed. I mean, I'm biased. I managed it when we set it up, So, but that was a need that was identified by our head of service at the time, and that was brought in. You'll go to some other services where they'll have a really strong digital offer. So Leeds have got a really strong offer in terms of digital support for people. So some places have had to focus on a strength, but there's still that universal offer. If you come in the door, it's a safe, accessible space, free at the point of contact. You can access knowledge, you can access entertainment, reading for pleasure, computers. So I think that's part of the challenge for libraries, is because they are universal service for anyone and everyone. It's difficult to make your unique pitch. So it's great that they are universally accessible, but then when you're trying to say to people why libraries are relevant to you, you've got a bit of a case to make. I think 152 library services. I think if you asked every head of service, you'd get 152 different answers as to what makes a library, which is one of the strengths, but also a challenge.
Absolutely. And I think that's really interesting, is that it is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity, isn't it? Because it means that they can look at what's local to them and say, this is what we need, and that's what we're going to focus on. So they're really responsive to the communities and the places around them, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think they have to be. You'll see services and they'll respond to the needs across the sector. So there'll be an identify, nationally there'll be, for the last decade or so, there's been a real push around digital inclusion. But if you go to a service, it will be hyper local. So, you'll have either 14 branches, 20 branches. They'll all have a slightly different flavour. They'll all have a slightly different offer. So you'll be able to walk through the door and get a book, use a computer, probably access Wi-Fi. There'll be activities for children and young people, but then there might be really specific offers around accessing healthcare provision. So Leeds libraries will provide you with access to midwifery support. Or you might go to another library in a rural place, and there'll be access to different, maybe building society or banking service. So it is really what is needed on that doorstep. So the libraries are agile and responsive to that local need, which is brilliant, but makes it really difficult to plan. When you're responding. So I think one of the steps we're trying to do is what's the vision, what's the role for libraries in the next 10, 20, 30 years in an ever evolving world.
Yeah, and I think that will be quite a powerful platform for them to build from, won't it? Because being able to have a bit of direction for your future gives you something to aim for and work towards, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think that's is having some of that certainty. So with uncertainties around budgets, I think it's been really great to see capital investment, for example. So the Libraries Improvement Fund through DCMS that we administer, that money coming in and seeing the impact on the ground. I mean, when I first started, maybe a couple of weeks in, I went to Clevedon in North Somerset. I was asked to go down. I went down to the Bristol office for a couple of days, and we went to the opening that was there. And I said this to the team in North Somerset. On paper, it was a £225,000 investment. It was a community room. Okay, I mean, it was going to be a benefit, but it didn't leap off the page. But when you walked into that room and saw the buy-in and the joy and the value that space and that change that space brought to that community, it was real. You could really see the impact. It was really sort of quite powerful. So I think there are, despite challenging circumstances across local government, libraries are continuing to be innovative and adaptive and changing. And I think by being able to have some of that certainty behind it will help libraries progress. So that's that. Again, you were asking earlier, what's the Arts Council's role? It's partly to say to people, this is what libraries can give to you. And Neil McInnes in Manchester, he's the assistant director there. He always said he used to go into rooms and say, this is what libraries do, and you could see people kind of switching off. Whereas what he says now is, these are your priorities and your outcomes, and this is how libraries can support them. And I think that's the role we've got to say is there is a real And I know my predecessor, Sue Williamson, had a real frustration. There's a real job to be done to say what a modern library service provides. So, I would venture that a lot of people don't know a modern library services provide access to laser cutters and sewing machines and maker spaces and animation technology, access to, healthcare appointments, access to machines that can track your blood pressure and your weight and can send that information to a doctor's surgery. They'll provide, you can come and get free advice on patents and trademarks and setting up a business, and those businesses will thrive and succeed. And we've got reports and evidence that demonstrate the value that they provide. So I think once people know what a library can provide, they're like, oh, wow, that's brilliant. But actually, a lot of people, there's still a nostalgia view of it. Oh, libraries were like this when I took my kids or when I was a kid. But actually what a library does in 2023 now, I think a lot of people would be pleasantly surprised. So that's, again, part of our role is to say, look at all the brilliant stuff that libraries do across the country.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important that we as an organisation are sharing those stories as much as we can. So hopefully we can continue to do that. You mentioned earlier about our national portfolio and us tripling our investment in libraries when we made that announcement last November, and they started their work in April of this year. Now, obviously, you've talked about the broad remit that libraries have, but our investment in them is much more focused around creativity and culture through our national portfolio. So what has this meant for the organisations that we have invested in, and what's impact has it had for kind of the staff that are working there and the users and audiences that are making use of those services?
Yeah, and I think, it's important as well when it comes to the portfolios to point out as well that, these are for programs of work. So, the libraries that we support are statutory services in local government, and they have core funding from local government. So we're providing money to enhance those services. And I think across that range, there are a range of libraries delivering different types of activity and reaching different audiences. So, for example, we've got activities that are supporting children and young people, and families through Playground in Kent. So they were already doing the work, but it allows them to amplify it. So this isn't about us saying, it isn't about you're only doing this because of it. It's like, here's something that's worked. How do we now make this a wider offer? So, the stuff that they've done there with children and young people is brilliant. And they're new to the portfolio. But then you've got people like St Helens who've got a really established program, really valued by the community. And I think it's embedded in there, and people know that it's available and know what they can get. And I think there's those two bits. It's been great to be able to have those 6 organisations who were previously in the portfolio continuing their journey, but then the new ones coming in, and it's such a variety as well. So pen to print, embarking and Dagenham, that's about writers. That's so it may not, for some people, it may not feel like it's not a library program, but it's within a library environment. It's a natural fit and setting for it. Like I say, Suffolk continue really good work on sort of health and well-being, supporting their communities, and they're also a different delivery model. So they're owned by their staff. They're a spin out. So again, they work in a slightly different way from maybe a traditional local authority. And then you've got people sort of like Libraries Unlimited in the southwest who have such a wide variety, and Warwickshire as well. You look at the variety of what they're doing is they've taken a package of things that they already provide to support people with, there's enjoying themselves in a large part of it. It's free, or low cost, easily accessible, entertaining activity. But then other things, that help support around digital skills, or helping people with their health and well-being, or helping people tackle isolation and loneliness. So there's a whole range of it, and I think that those different programs of activities speak, like we said before, to those very specific local issues. Barnsley have a really great music program with theirs, and I think like I said, there's a lot of activity supporting children and young people, and working with writers. So I think it really reaches a whole remit of additional sort of activity that uses the library as a safe, accessible space with knowledgeable staff, and it gives the staff that work there, it gives them an opportunity to engage more deeply with their users, customers, members, whatever we're going to call them. It gives an opportunity to really spend more time with them and get to know them more and understand what they need. So it's that additionality that's beyond opening the door and providing those basic services. It's the next bit beyond that, and it's really important that idea of cultural activity on people's doorsteps, for people and by people who look and sound like them as well. So it's and the barrier to accessing a library is so much lower than the barrier to accessing a theatre or a doctor's surgery or a business support centre. And no disrespect to any of them, and I know there's particularly some theatres doing great work to engage with their communities, but for some people, that library is that only open door in their community, and it's much easier for them to step across the threshold.
Absolutely. And when you talk about those kind of it being the only space maybe in their community, a lot of libraries are kind of in rural spaces, aren't they? They're in spaces where people may not have access to much else within the places that they're living. So they really do create a space for activity that they might not otherwise have the opportunity to experience.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think it is because I think for some people they've already spent time in the library and they know it and it's a familiar place, and for other people it's easy to get to. It's the barriers in terms of travel and cost to get there aren't there, and I think it's there are people miss out on opportunities. So by that being there, it's something new and different that they wouldn't necessarily see. And I think on the one hand there is seeing things on your doorstep for you and for people who look and sound like you, but also we did events here in Newcastle. People were really thrilled to see events and activities put on in our central in our city library. That big hub library. It's a kind of a space that sometimes people could put performances on where they would never had an opportunity. So I think there really is something about giving people access to what would be missed opportunities for them otherwise.
It's been wonderful talking to you, and we couldn't let you go without. You've already talked about some of the projects that you've seen, but it'd be great to hear more about some of the amazing projects that you've had the opportunity to experience over the last year, and maybe some of the ones that are coming up that that we've invested in or that we're supporting, and that will give a real offer to the communities that they'll experience them.
I mean, I think it's you're not supposed to have favourites. I don't have favourites of this, but there was one of the best ones I really went to was the Big Malarkey in Hull. So they pitch it as Glasgow for Kids. It's on the Glastonbury weekend. It's a children's literary festival. So we took our 2.5-year-old with us. We thought we'd do the proper experience it with a little one. Went down there for a couple of days. It's in a park on the sort of east side of Hull. And they've got the massive tent, authors singing, creative activities. The makers space was there, all sorts, and it was just it was a glorious day for a start. But it was just there was a real community feeling. I mean in the sense of there was an ownership of it. This was something that people felt was theirs. Was on, like I said, we'd said before, was on their doorstep. It was packed out with people. There was the staff were incredible. The people working there were brilliant. Engaging with people. And the quality of the event was brilliant. The people performing there, what was it? We were in this big tent singing songs and running around the place. Chaos is maybe not the right word, but certainly it was there was a lot going on, and it was just you could see that this was a well-established event, that the funding that we provided was going to take it to another level, was going to enhance it on there. So I think that was just a brilliant one to see. Maybe outside of the portfolio stuff as well, it's been great in funding to do new things. So I was in Darlington, they've got an incredible library there. And back to the, what you expect from a modern library service. They've got this maker space, they've got this digital space, they've got this brilliant children's library. So, if anyone's in Darlington, I'd definitely take a pop along to see there. But, seeing some of these libraries they're getting these capital works being done to them, and the spaces they're going to provide for their communities are brilliant. The Bibliobeat stuff that's been happening in Barnsley has been so popular with people, and kind of started from the get-go, straight out the door they were doing it. And I think for some of it as well is, certainly for those who have been providing it for a long time, it's become sort of their bread and butter. It feels natural to them, so it's fitting into their programs of activity. So St Helens stuff is just kept going at such a high quality and such a high standard for people, to be able to easily access. And I think continuing to see the range of programs that are going to come through, that people can see and can benefit from, and is that low cost, or certainly free at the point of access. And I think there is still there's a part for us to demonstrate how libraries are part of that wider cultural offer as well. So there's going to be stuff that's on people's like we see on people's doorstep and easy to access.
Amazing. And before we let you go, it's been wonderful chatting to you. But obviously, Libraries Week is coming up, It's a hugely important time. It's obviously the activity takes place all year round, but it's a great platform for them. And this year is all about going green, being environmentally responsible. What sort of role can libraries play in environmental responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think libraries have got a massive role to play across some of society's biggest challenges around the green agenda, around tackling isolation and loneliness, around making people active citizens in democracy. But I think, in particular, in the green agenda, on the simplest point, access to good quality, reliable information that can tell you how to make changes in your life that will help combat the climate crisis, but also facts on the reality of the situation. So good, reliable information. I think they also provide spaces for communities to come together and try and take practical steps to address it. So we've got libraries who've got bees. They've got hives, and they've got gardens that they're developing. We've got people who've got they're contributing to the council's net zero agendas by putting solar panels on buildings and having air source heat pumps. So I think the buildings can be demonstrators of practical steps that large organizations can take in combating climate change. I think they can provide spaces for community access to carry out activities and learn how you can live sort of responsibly. And then I think they also have that access to quality information so that you can get facts on what the climate situation, the climate crisis that we're facing. And I think particularly for a younger generation who are going to be living through this more than some of us, that it's a really good opportunity for them to engage with the topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for your time today, Luke. We hope you enjoy your time in Newcastle Library and the many others that you visit throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Nick. Good to talk to you.